Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here again with the new Segue Says podcast. As you can see by the lack of light coming in through the windows, I'm significantly late in getting this one filmed into you just because things have been going a little crazy around here just between getting stuff done and failing to get stuff done. But that's another story. So, this week's Segue Says podcast is a relatively new development, but I wanted to share it with you because I'm really excited about it. And the two songs are pretty different in feel. They're different in tempo, which is going to be an interesting experiment, but they're both in the same key. So the two songs are Going to California by Led Zeppelin and Old Man by Neil Young. Now, two songs that are very famous in the history of classic rock, so you probably know them. Going to California was, of course, off Led Zeppelin 4, probably their most successful record. Spent my days with a womankind, smoked my stuff and drank all my wine. Now, those of you who, like myself, traveled in the circles with the brew will know it because they did an incredible rewrite of it, which I believe is fairly difficult to find now. But if you can, it's worth a listen. It's a very cool sort of much harder rock than the original. Smoked my stuff and drank all my wine. And that's the way I'd actually been playing this song for a couple of years. I only recently learned the original version. That's a bit of a diversion, but bear with me. So, most of Going to California, is these two chords. It's in D major, and it's basically G, D, over and over again for the verses. And the verses are in groups of 3 lines, but after each verse there's this very brief transition to D minor. Before going back to D major. And then the last one there's a second D minor. And that's going to be very important. The D minor actually has its own section in the middle of the song, which I suppose you call the chorus. It says, "See like a wrath of the gods, got a punch on the nose, starting to flow, I think it might be sinking." The most Zeppelin part of the song, probably. "Throw me a line if I reach it in time, meet me up there where the path runs straight and high." So it's a very interesting song, unusual sort of chordscape, and the structure of it is very unusual. So that's Going to California. Old Man by Neil Young is also in D major and utilizes some unusual chords because the intro is sort of a D minor over F with tensions 11 and 13 for my more musically inclined people. It's basically this weird chord, and everybody I've ever heard play this does a different chord here. Different voicings for it. This is the intro, by which point most people recognize it. "Oh man, look at my life, I'm a lot like you were. Oh man, look at my life, I'm a lot like you were." This is a verse chorus structure for you, just to make sure you know it. "Oh man, look at my life, 24 and it's so much more. Doesn't mean that much to me, to mean that much to you. I've been lost to call, damn it. Give me things that won't get lost, like a coin that won't get tossed, rolling onto you." Screwed up the words there. I'm a lot like you. And it goes to the form again. Now, sometimes when I'm setting up the segues, you can easily see where they're going to happen or how they're going to work. This one's a little trickier because it doesn't use the same chords per se, and the songs are at different tempos. Now, of course, the most important part is the end and the beginning. The end of Going to California and the beginning of Old Man. So Going to California fades out on the record. And as I said, I only recently started playing the original version. Because I learned it was one of the favorite songs of one of the managers at the piano bar where I play. So I figured, okay, I like to play the songs that people who work there like, as well as the odd songs the customers like. So I started playing this one, and I got to the end, and I realized it's one of those songs that doesn't necessarily have a great way to end it instinctively. There's some songs, even that fade out, that you can picture the ending, like Benny and the Jets, for example, is one of those. It fades out just on the 2-chord progression in the original record. But even before the first live versions came out, you could picture this ending. Because it just is right there. Going to California doesn't really have one of those. It's one of the ones where you could, you could just end it on, because it basically fades out on this D chord, and you could just essentially stop playing. And that's, excuse me, hiccups. That's probably what most people would do. But I was playing this, and as I mentioned, after the last verse, there's not another chorus, if you even want to call it that. It more resembles a bridge. But it does go back to the D minor for a couple chords. So you have the last, standing on the hill on the mountain of dreams, telling myself it's not as hard as it seems. As I said, it does this twice. So it starts to establish a back and forth pattern that it doesn't really continue. But I thought if you did continue this, it's a little similar, to the opening chords of Old Man. This works mainly, of course, because it's sort of a D minor over F, or you could think of it as a variation of an F major chord. But again, for those musically inclined, you know that F major is the relative major of D minor, which means they share the same scale. So that makes them not interchangeable, but certainly much more closely related than chords that don't have the same scale. So that's where the similarity kind of began. And again, the drawback is that there are different speeds, but because you can establish this back and forth pattern in Going to California, it makes it easier to slow it down more subtly. One thing of note is that the chords are of equal length in Going to California, whereas in Old Man, the first chord is twice the length of the D major. So if you want to establish the transition, what you can do is, while you're still doing the Going to California progression, is you can switch where you make the turnaround so that the first chord is twice as long as the D major. And just keep doing this until you've slowed down enough. Eventually, you change the first chord from the D minor to the variation of the F chord or the D minor chord or whatever you want to think of it as, because it's very ambiguous. Do that a couple of times and then you cue the vocals. Oh man, look at my life, I'm a lot like you. Look at my life, I'm a lot like you were. Now obviously this one is much more of a one-way segue, and it could work the other way in theory because Old Man ends on the verse progression instrumentally. Out of the final chord, you could just start the rhythm of Going to California. But I prefer to do Going to California and Old Man because the slowing down is a dramatic effect, and it's also a challenge to do it in a way that it's not too quick, but it doesn't take too long. So it's a little fun in that it's something that's difficult to do. So that's the way I like to do that one. And I apologize if I'm kind of stumbling through this one this week. I've been a little muddled this past week. I've had so much stuff to try to get done and keep balance. So I'm a little exhausted at this point. But done the best I can, and I figured wanted to make sure I got one done every week because it's good to have that kind of commitment and stability for something at least. So thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next week, hopefully in a more calm and collected state of mind.